Hey everyone, I'm Tiffany and welcome to the Wise Skies podcast. I'm so excited today because we have special guest Sarah L'HRar. Hi Sarah.
Hi, Tiffany. Hi, everybody.
And Sarah is known as the Astro Auntie. So you can find her on Instagram at Astro Auntie. And Sarah, I am so excited to talk to you. I have goosebumps. I know we're going to have a great conversation. Sarah just got back from the ESAR conference and has some nuggets for us. But before we jump into our talk today, which we're going to talk about the Midheaven, I want you to just give people a little background and a warm hello, a little bit about your special take on astrology, where your practice is, and where you're from, where you live, all that kind of stuff.
Cool. So, my name is Sarah L'HRar. It spells weird, but that's the way you say it. In Arabic, L'HRar means the liberator, which is very funny because in astrology, I have a big signature about liberation. I have Uranus on my midheaven. We're going to talk about the midheaven together a little bit later. I was born in France, so I'm French. I lived in the US. I've been living in North America now for I think 30 years or something silly like that. Well, how old am I? I'm 45. I'm an astrologer, a professional astrologer and an astrology teacher. I started studying astrology 25 years ago when I was 20. And studied under Deborah Silverman for a long time, who is my mentor and my astrologer and whom I adore. And I work with her at her school. And so she gave me my first reading when I was 20 and just blew my mind and changed my life. Like, little did I know my life was going to be changed that day, because I don't think I realized what was going on. But there definitely was a seed that was planted. And so this feeling that I got from my first reading is something that I've always wanted to share forward and that I get to do now as a job. And so it's really amazing how, these little moments, these meetings, and you don't know how a moment is going to grow and change everything forever. So that really was the seed of everything. And so now I practice humanistic and psychological astrology with some nods of evolutionary. So that might seem a little wordy for those who don't know what it means. But basically what I do is I interpret the sky to make it practical for people to apply in their life and help them grow into the person that they want to be, basically. So yeah, does that answer the question?
That answers the question. Absolutely.
Sure.
I call it connecting the cosmic dots, what you're talking about, when something starts and you have no idea how much it pivots your fate or pivots your future. And really, it's very similar. I had my first foundational astrology reading when I was 20. And I didn't know that the people that I met in that class that would be colleagues 20 years later. One of the women in that class, that my first class, is writing our gift guide this year. So it's really cool, how astrology and the astrology family and the people that are in the field of professional astrology. We were talking a little bit before the podcast, because you just got back from this big conference. It's like a really good group of people that are in the cutting edge leading astrology right now. And it didn't always used to be that way. Astrology used to be very taboo. And now you know your sun sign and your rising sign, and you know your moon sign, but you might not be as familiar with your midheaven. And so that is why we want to bring that into your full focus for the next, for this part of the conversation. And so can you tell me, how do you use the midheaven in terms of when clients come to you with a question? What makes you zone in on the midheaven?
So it's interesting because the midheaven in Western culture, and so now in North America and Europe, people really want to correlate purpose and career. And so the midheaven, which is really the point in your natal chart that speaks about your contribution to the collective, is often read as your career point. So a lot of people will want to read this as your career, but it's much broader than that. So it does include career, but it's not limited to career. It really speaks about what you came to give to the world. So for me, midheaven might be also a point of generosity, or it should be read as a point of generosity. And I find that sometimes clients will want to read it as, what can I get from, how can I get something? Whereas it's really, the shift is thinking about, what can I give? And so the first thing that I do when I have my clients ask me about, what's my purpose? What did I come to do in this life? Is to really reframe the definition of purpose and mission, that it's not always a job. It's not always what pays your bills, but it's more like, what contribution do you have for your community? What did you come here to give? And so for me, like, it starts with defining what purpose and mission means, and then really finding all the ways that this could be interpreted. So you would find the sign that sits at the very top of your chart. So the rising is somewhere, if your chart was a clock, your rising would be at 9 o'clock, and midheaven would be at 12 o'clock. And so the sign that sits there at 12 o'clock is the sign that you have at midheaven. And it speaks a lot about the ways that you came to show up in community, and also what people want from you, what the collective needs from you. And I think it's a really beautiful placement to discover, to investigate, and to think about. Yeah.
Well, I love that. Will you talk a little bit about your midheaven?
Yeah. So my midheaven is in Scorpio, and Scorpio is a sign of Scorpio is a sign of transformation. And so of transformation, of depth, of trust. And I also have planet Uranus sitting right there. And so when you have a planet sitting on an angle, so midheaven is at an angle, right? So the 9 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 12 o'clock are called angles in astrology. And when you have a planet that is sitting right there on one of these angles, it really redefines everything about the way you express it. For me, that planet is Uranus. And Uranus is a planet that's very connected to liberation, which, I mentioned previously. So my last name, L'HRar, in Arabic means the liberator. And I thought that was so sweet for me when I found that out, that I had the planet of liberation literally sitting on my midheaven. And so my work is really to help people free themselves from their own way, from their own shackles, self-imposed, limiting beliefs about what they can or can't do, and really work towards like a more expansive, more liberated expression for themselves. So my tagline on my website is Astrology for personal and collective liberation. What's funny about this is I used to work in fashion, and my specialty was trend prediction. And so prediction and trends and pattern recognition, that's all very Uranian. Uranus is also a planet that's a little bit avant-garde. It's a planet in modern astrology that rules design and astrology. So basically, if an astrologer would look at my chart, they'd be like, oh, you're either going to be a fashion designer or be an astrologer. And I ended up doing both in this life. And it's also, a planet of doing things differently and trying new things and thinking out of the box. And I found that this is what people come to me for, and that this is what they seek out in me, is that kind of like out of the box, different way to think, to help them kind of like unlock their patterns. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I mean, it makes total sense to me. It's just, it's so perfect. You can do the same thing with like fabric and kind of the costume that we wear as you can do with the planets and, you know, the personality that comes through the costume. So I love that you got to do, like you said, both in this lifetime. Now, you know, the midheaven is opposite, right? The fourth house, the home and family. And like you're talking about the angles. So we've got it opposite the fourth house, the home and family, and in a square to the first house of kind of the self, and the seventh house of what we would look at for relationships. And so can you speak a little bit about that full cross and what might be energies pulling on each other or supporting each other?
Oh yeah, definitely. So I these are like two axes in astrology. So the rising is always opposite your descendant, and the midheaven is always opposite your nadir, which is the IC. So that axis of midheaven and nadir, like you said, it's the home and the public life, so the personal private life at the bottom of the chart, and the public life at the top of the chart. And so how I relate them to one another is roots to fruits.
Mm-hmm.
You learn and you gather all of this knowledge of the self and where you come from. It's literally where you come from and where you're going. And so there's really this sense of like legacy that happens at the bottom of the chart, at the IC, where you're being passed on knowledge from your ancestors,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you go all the way up to the collective, to the world, and you give that up, right? And so it's, for me, that's where it's a point of generosity. That's when you're like in full bloom, in fruit, and you get to give that at the midheaven. For the AC/DC axis, and so that's funny for people who are not familiar with astrology, like this is AC/DC, literally. So the AC/DC is the rising sign at the AC. Another word for rising is ascendant, and the descendant at the opposite. So that axis is myself and the other, right? And so we have kind of like a full wheel that goes from your identity, understanding who you are and who you want to be at the AC, then understanding where you come from, then to understanding another, who you want to be with and who you need to complete you, until you realize your gifts and you're ready to give them. So it kind of like works like a wheel, from the most personal to the most collective. And so this is the way the houses work, from 1 to 12. By the time you're in the 12th house, like it's so collective, we're including spirit and God, and like it's like the absence of self almost, and the pure identity that we find at the rising, right?
Yeah, that's so good. Because a lot of our listeners are going to be familiar with me, I want to put in some of like how you could see what she's talking about in my chart too. You're talking about the 12th house where it gets to spirit and God. My 12th house is Scorpio. I have 4 planets over there, including my sun and moon. I was born on a new moon. And so I have that ability to talk with spirit. You guys have seen my demonstrations of mediumship. You've seen my demonstrations of psychic work. And that's a lot of where that comes from, right? But then if you take that and you draw that and you use the midheaven as a reference, so my midheaven is in Virgo, right? Even though I don't have any planets in Virgo, I have 4 planets in Libra over there in the 10th and 11th house, but none in Virgo. Yet it's very powerful information because Virgo is the healer, right? Is the so my service work is helping with people through grief and understanding the afterlife and being like the producer behind the scenes of all of that. So I'm pulled into that sense of purpose, all the way from the 4th up to the 10th house, but you get hints of it from the 12th first house too. Does that make sense? Did I?
Oh yeah,
Did I
totally.
tie something in? Did I contribute?
Totally. I love that you have your midheaven in Virgo. So that for me, some of the first steps that people can look at right now is also what element is your midheaven in. You can
Mm,
sometimes, when you don't know much astrology or you don't understand a lot about the signs, they can get down to the basics. And so in astrology, every sign is divided in 4 elements. So we have fire, earth, air, and water are the 4 elements.
mhm.
And so, and if you look at your chart, maybe there will be a color code that earth will be green and fire will be red and air will be yellow and water will be blue. But looking at which color or which element your MC point is in will really indicate what you came to help people with also, right? So when you have your midheaven and earth, sometimes you come to help people also with very practical things, very real things of life, which is funny for you as a psychic as well, with all that water and all that 12th house and those Scorpio planets. But you're making it very concrete and accessible for people. Like this is not imaginary. You are literally rolling up your sleeves and helping people, make sense of it, which is a very Virgo thing, right?
You
So
know,
people,
that's such a
yeah,
good way of putting. I hadn't seen it like that, so I'm glad to look through your prism about it, because I started teaching these psychic catalyst classes where I'm teaching people to be psychic, because I believe that we're born psychic, and so there's nothing to prove to me. I believe that you are, and it kind of lessens that. But these practical ways, the one that we did recently, I was teaching people how to get get the dates and the times. And these are people, of all levels, right? Like these are all levels, people that have never tried to work their psychic magic or whatever. We did one simple exercise, and this group of people, I mean, they guessed my birth date, my mom's birth date, my grandmother's birth date, my anniversary. And
wow.
like chill bumps, like I was just blown away. Just one simple practical tool. And I hadn't related that to be like an earth sign practical thing. So I really appreciate you pointing that out, because I don't have anything in earth. I don't have any planets in earth. But I have the midheaven there, and it's helpful.
Yeah, and it really helps them make it concrete. Like you help people make it real.
Mhm.
It's not all emotional. Whereas what's interesting that you're saying that you don't have one planet in earth, I don't have one planet in water.
Mhm.
Right? And my midheaven is in Scorpio, which is a
Scorpio.
water sign, which I help people process deep emotions.
Mhm.
And so if you have your midheaven in water, like people are going to look to you for emotional support. They're
Mm.
going to want you to hear them and hold space for them and love them through their stuff. If you have your midheaven in fire, maybe people will want you to bring energy to them and to make them feel empowered and lively. And if you have your midheaven in air, people might need you to help them understand things, to listen to them, to help them make sense of things intellectually, right? And
Mhm.
so that could be like a very basic foundation of understanding your midheaven would be to look at which element it's in, right?
Right. Totally.
And so then a very advanced way for those who know astrology who are listening to the podcast, like a more advanced way would be to look at the ruling planet of
Mhm.
your midheaven and find that in your chart. So for instance, for you, it's Virgo. Virgo is ruled by Mercury. Where is Mercury?
Mercury's in my 11th house in Scorpio.
Which makes also a lot of sense that it's in your 11th house of community. And
Mhm.
so you're also a community builder. So looking at where the ruling, which house that ruling planet is in, will also unlock a next layer of this. So these are layers to peel back. Of course, in a 1 hour workshop, I'm going to try to keep it simple and really palatable for those, who really want to understand basics, but I'll give hints for those who are a little bit more advanced so that they can continue like peeling those layers, because there's really a lot of answers. And that can feel like relief also. So for instance, I was saying, for me, there was this thing where it was design and astrology, right? So for instance, I had a student who had Venus on her midheaven. And Venus, classically rules like women and all things women. So this girl had been a hairdresser, that's a Venus thing, a massage therapist. She was doing coaching for women. Her whole practice was in services. Oh, she had been a chef, a lot of Venusian things. So it can be many things. So what the midheaven is not is a job. That's what it's not. It's not a single job. It's more like a thread of, maybe your zone of genius, and definitely what the collective wants to learn from you, wants to receive from you.
I love that. A thread for your zone of genius. I need to write that one down. It's very freeing too, because you're not locked into a thing that you should be doing for, it's your expression comes over time in different ways. So I really like the way you said that.
Yeah, and it reminds me, you're probably familiar with Danielle Laporte's Desire Map, right? And so in that book, so that's a great, great book for anybody who hasn't read it. It's like a classic of self-help, yeah? It's in that book, what she explains is that we usually, like when we pray or want to manifest things, sometimes we fixate on a thing, right? But to broaden our wishes for feelings can include so many more answers. So for instance, when you do that with the midheaven and you broaden the possibility of expression, and I'll just say, for instance, I'm a school teacher, period, the end. Because the truth is that for most people, it's very rare to meet somebody that had just the one career their whole life, the one job their whole life, and feels like this is the answer and the be all end all for all of their questions and their purpose, right? So when we kind of like broaden that to a feeling, to an emotion, and say, the way I want to feel in my work, in my contribution is a large thing, that then you can, find that feeling in many different ways to express it.
Yes, and I've been saying this a lot too. I heard it in a Joe Dispenza book that I really like, but he says, you don't have to be the creator, and that was so freeing too. I was like, hang on, because we're taught to like create and go and do and hustle, but that's not the case. You don't have to be the creator. You do have to be the designer. You have to design, and then you can let the great mind or the collective create. And so as you are tapping into those feelings that might be a thread over many careers over your life, right? That might look a lot different, right? Like you were talking about your client with Venus that was a hairdresser and a chef and a this and a that and this, that was all applicable to her, but over the course of the lifetime, maybe there was a feeling tone or an essence of supporting the
pleasure, right? Supporting women, supporting pleasure, supporting beauty. And so then when she realized this, it was also a relief, I think, for her to think, oh, that it actually all makes sense. I'm actually not crazy that I went from hairdressing to massage to chef to women's retreats. It's not me being crazy or flaky. It's actually me finding many ways to express that which I've come to offer, which is Venus work, right? Yes. Work that brings pleasure to women sometimes. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, and beauty and all of these things that could be Venus things. Same thing with me and astrology and design. They're both under the Uranus umbrella,
Very much so. I don't think that we've told everybody that your workshop is September 12th. So I just want to
Oh,
make sure, if you're wondering when you can come have workshop with us, it's going to be September 12th at noon Central Time. And so you can come sign up at wiseskiescollective.com under the classes tab if you're a non-member, or if you'd like to become a member, you can go to the membership page and join up there, and it's included in your membership. So either way, we would love to see you on September 12th at noon. And Sarah is also going to do a mini Ask Me Anything ahead of time. So if you're like, I'm not so sure about this workshop, like, what am I really going to learn? Or here's this thing about my chart that I think is too quirky and I want to get some advanced info, we are going to do a short 15-minute Ask Me Anything on September 9th at 10 a.m. Central Time. So we'll be on Instagram at Wise Skies Collective and Astro Auntie. Do you say auntie or auntie? How do you say
I
it?
say auntie. I
Yeah.
say auntie, but some people say auntie, which I don't know. Yeah, sure. Whatever.
Yeah. I say
Yeah.
my aunts. We both have, like, my last name is Harlick. It's not spelled that way, but I always say Harlick, like garlic. And so we have that in common, like the little weird
The har. Wait, the har.
the har and the rar.
The rar. That's so funny. Yeah. My name has a lot of R's and A's and H's. It's like, it's silly. It's silly. They should, my parents, when it's just Sarah on top of the L'HRar, it's a lot.
That's a lot. What was your first job?
My first job was, I was a receptionist at a architect's office when I was like a teenager.
Mhm.
So I answered phones at an architect's place.
Mhm.
After that, I worked at TCBY
Mhm.
and I made frozen yogurt for people.
Mhm.
And so
Life-changing froyo.
life-changing froyo, which is very funny because I really love frozen yogurt.
Mhm.
Um, okay, maybe babysitter, does that count? Yeah,
Of course,
sure. I
yeah.
was a babysitter before then. I was a waitress. I did a bunch of like little stuff while I was studying, right? I had my kids really early. I had my first child when I was 22.
Same.
And so I was doing odd jobs a lot. And then I finally, so a job that really changed the course of
Mhm.
my life was that I was working at the Kabbalah Center for
Mhm.
a long time. And I was sitting next to the astrologer of the Kabbalah
Mm.
Center. And she was fascinating. Her name was Yael Yardeni, just like a fascinating woman who was also French. And so we would speak in French, and she dropped a lot of knowledge just by me sitting next to her when I was like assistant to the CTO, like just like a jobby job, you know? But she would just like drop nuggets of wisdom to me. And so at that time, I was still studying fashion. And then I went on to be an illustrator for fashion, worked in fabric. But that woman was really important in my studies, actually. And that's when I started studying astrology seriously, was when I had that job and I was sitting next to her.
That's an amazing experience.
Yeah.
At any point, did you ever feel like, this is not me, I'm not on track, this isn't what I want to do, I need to pivot something? Did you have those feelings? You might not have, but I know
I
that a
was
lot.
very focused on art and design for my whole life. Like I went to art school, like I knew that was the track for me, was going to be art and design and illustration and all of that. So, but what happened was that when I was a part-time astrologer and full-time designer, I was really feeling split for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was quite painful, actually, not knowing what to do. And I felt like I couldn't do the thing well if I was doing both
Mm-hmm.
at once. That was years of just feeling very split between both things. And then around 2019, It was a shift where the design started to not be as interesting
Hmm.
to me
Mm-hmm.
and kind of like roll my eyes at it,
Mm-hmm.
which might have happened actually, wait, might have started happening when my mom died in 2011.
Interesting.
When my mom passed away, I was like, do I really want to focus on buttons and the way people are dressed forever? Something like my passion for all my life all of a sudden felt a little like not enough. And I felt like there was more contribution that I was meant to give.
Mhm.
And that's when I went to astrology school myself. I started school in 2014 to get certified as an astrologer. And so that was like the beginning of the split. What do I do? What do I do? Which lasted about 5 years
Mhm.
of torture. What did you do before, Tiff?
My first job, I worked at Dollar Western Wear in Abilene, Texas. And so I was in the rodeo crowd, and that was a great job for a 16-year-old, you know. I wanted to be a vet, and so I worked for a veterinarian, and that was very, very pivotal in
Vet?
realizing.
Can you say Virgo? Okay, hey.
Oh, I didn't think about that. But
Shoot.
I like I was in like a trauma equine center, and the first couple of days, I mean, I went on and I worked for vets throughout my life, but I was not going to be able to hang with the amount of pain because I'm so sensitive. Like I just even thinking about the episode just it's just so painful for me. And so I realized it wasn't all good vibes in the vet office. And so I didn't do that, but astrology really helped me, you know, see. My first teacher when I was 20, he said, "What do you want to do?" And I'm like, "Party, you know, I want to party. What do you want to do?" Right? And he's like, "Well, I mean, I'm looking at your chart and I see all this Scorpio, and it feels like it would be good to have a clue." I think he was like, "Are you going to go out and be a really bad person or a really good person?" With looking at the intensity there. And I said, "You know what I really want to do?" And he said, "What?" And I said, "Help people. That's what I want to do." "How do you help? What is that?" And turns out, like your example, I could help people in a lot of different ways, making things practical, bringing heaven to earth with these conversations, you know, between spirit and each other. I have a publishing company, and so I'm 41, facing my Uranus opposition next year. And so much like you're talking about after my mom passed, right? Like that is a common thread that I see in clients too. After their significant parent pass, for females, the mom, there is a shift, you know, there's some kind of shift of purpose, or there's a freedom in what you thought you were supposed to be. There's many ways that plays out, right, depending on your mom-daughter dynamics. But for me, it's been about 3 years, and I have a publishing company, Spellbound, which is metaphysical books, and then I have Wise Skies, which is based in astrology, but we're a metaphysical counseling company that offers one-on-one sessions, and then the membership, right? So I have drifted. I've written the astrology column for Wise Skies for years, and I have been more called to be on the psychic side of things. And so much like you're talking about this pivot, I am hiring a new person to take over the production of management of Spellbound, the book company. I've hired admin support for Wise Skies. And the less I'm forcing myself to do everything, and I'm just kind of honing in on that legacy piece, which gives me the most amount of fulfillment. It doesn't mean that I'm totally letting go of all of these pieces. It means if I can manage it a little bit differently, that I feel so fulfilled, right? Like I feel like I'm answering my highest calling. And that's a very different feeling than like entrepreneurial, you know what I mean, skill building and like networking and all of the things that that society loves to teach us to do. So yeah, I had a lot of different jobs. I have a master's in health psychology. I worked in a bar for 20 years. I had a side gig for a really long time that was very fruitful, a lot of great people. I have, I rode horses. So I taught training. I trained horses for part of my career. I wrote 15 cookbooks right before.
So Virgo, 15 cookbooks
So
also.
Virgo, right? Like lots of detail with the recipes, like you better get it right. Like this order goes in this order, right? But yeah, it's cool. And I appreciate this conversation. What do you think? Like, is there anything that you want to talk about in terms of the workshop that you feel like that would really help people if they were to attend? Like, what are some nuggets that they are going to get?
So one very important thing about the midheaven is that you need to know your birth time.
Yes.
This is mandatory. So the midheaven really is dependent on your birth time. If you don't know your birth time, you cannot find your midheaven.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, I don't want to be exclusionary or anything, but this is birth time only, people. If you know, it's really, it's one of these points in astrology, like your rising. And so the angles that we were speaking before, the rising, the deer, the descendant, and the midheaven are all very dependent on your time of birth. And they change signs every 2 hours. So it's literally very specific.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing that I want people to know, is that they need to know their birth time.
Mm-hmm.
To find your midheaven, you're going to need to be able also to find your chart. So there's different websites that you can go to. One of them is astro.com. I don't know if it's a little complicated to read that on astro.com. I know there's Astrology Cafe that also does charts that are kind of like easy to read. There's astro-charts.com also that does charts. So it would be really great if the students come with an idea of where their midheaven is. And so to find your midheaven, you're going to be either looking at the circle and finding the sign at the top at noon, at 12 o'clock of your chart that says MC.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's going to be in the list, and the things that are listed of your charts. There's going to be all the signs of each planet. And at some point, it's going to say AC for your rising and MC for your midheaven. And so finding that is quite important, because I'm going to teach the workshop assuming that people know the sign that their midheaven is.
Do they need to know the degree? Do you use that in your sessions?
Not for this workshop. For my sessions, I do, because I want to know also how the whole chart relates to it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like a really important part of astrology. And for people who know astrology, we don't isolate factors as much. We like to correlate them together. So this is called aspects. When you look at how different things speak to one another in your chart. And that, for me, that's the most important part of astrology, is that conversational bit about how do things correlate to each other. That's called aspects, but that's very advanced astrology. So for this workshop, I want to keep it simple. I want to make it accessible. So the only thing that people need is their birth time and to know the sign of their midheaven. And we'll discuss about what that means for them, how they can express that, how to find their zone of genius through understanding their midheaven. I want to make it as open as possible. I want astrology to be a practice of self-discovery and self-questioning. I find that astrology is interesting when it asks the right questions rather than gives you the answers, because people know themselves.
Right.
And they know what they like and they know who they are. So if astrology asks the right questions, it will help you come up with the answers that are relevant for you. So a good astrologer is not going to tell you who you are. A good astrologer will ask you the right questions for you to hear yourself and find yourself through your own answers. So that's my goal for this workshop, is to really help people hear their own story and find their own narrative. And hopefully that narrative will help them feel like they can access this very elusive feeling that is purpose. You know, it's one of the questions that clients come to me with the most, is what's my purpose?
Mm-hmm.
People want to know, what's my purpose? When will I find love? You know, how about my health? They want to know love, health, and money.
Money, yeah.
And so this question of purpose is a very valid one, because nobody wants to just, you know, wake up, go do a job, pay your bills, go back to sleep, poop, eat, that's it, the end. We really want to, we all want to feel engaged, aligned, like we have something to contribute. People want to contribute really deeply. And so this is what this question is. When people say, what's my purpose? They really want to know, how can I help?
Mm-hmm.
That's what's under this question, you know? How can I help? What are the talents? What resources do I have to make a difference? And this is really the yearning of asking for your purpose, is to know how you can help. And so when we start reframing things in this way, you're really asking how you can help. This is really a very generous question. Let's find out about all the ways, whatever all the ways you could help, you know, and how to feel aligned with what you know, might be your soul's calling, you know?
And I think it helps you see that there were no mistakes in your life, that that you're under this no fault living, that you're under this trial and error, and you are living your calling by even asking the question. You know, you're
Exactly.
like the zhuzh is happening just by asking the question, you know?
Yeah, and you know, sometimes people are like, oh, what's my path? But
Mhm.
is there a way that we cannot be on the path?
Right, right.
There is, you know, it's like saying, what's how can I find my destiny? Like it's happening and unfolding right now. The thing is just like finding the perspective, getting into the perspective of seeing that you were on the path all along, that you were living your calling all along, that you do know what your purpose is, you know.
Mhm.
And that it's just a matter of, like kind of like holding it and knowing it and cherishing it, you know. Yeah, and loving it.
Mhm. You know, I was like, what else did I do? Because it wasn't just that. And a big part of my career was music. I was in music festivals, and I did like I would manage different areas of the music festival, or I would create a festival. And they were large scale. So that Mercury in the 11th house, I mean, they were 30, 60, 100,000 people, like large events, right? And with music, so that healing effect that it has. So you could look at my career, and like there was a period where I really felt so scattered, that there wasn't an umbrella, that none of this was tied together, you know. And the more I'm even trying to find something obscure to kind of trick myself, like, but there's just no way that it's not part of this
And I
Virgo
know you work
midheaven.
with bees also, right? You have like this,
Right, yeah.
and so that's such like Virgo business too. You know, like the bees is like the most Virgo thing. I mean, bees are Virgo by nature. They just
Right,
are. They're like the Virgoist,
right.
right?
Yes.
They take something and they transform it, first of all. So that's the true nature of Virgo. Virgo being earth mutable, right?
Mhm.
Is to take one matter, mutable, transform it, and bring something else. So
Mhm.
for me, that would be like a thing that would be really interesting for you to think about as a Virgo midheaven, is this idea of like process that comes with Virgo. You take something, you do something to it, and you offer something else, very much like a bee taking the pollen, making the honey. Yeah.
And everything in the hive is healing. The propolis, the honey, the honeycomb, everything inside the hive it's part of apitherapy. Even the sting, right? Even the
Yeah.
bee,
Yeah.
right? So even I got my Scorpio stinger somehow involved there.
Exactly. That's so funny.
But
Yeah.
yeah, and
And
they're
they live
very
in a community. They're a community. They're very
community.
11th house-ish also.
Uh,
Right.
yes, and they require they have like a hierarchy in their organization and the way that they do all of their tasks. Their jobs, these jobs change as they get older. They start as nurse bees, they all start as nurse bees, and then as they get older they go through a hierarchy of tasks inside the hive moving out. And so the foragers that you see flying around aren't they're not babies. They weren't born yesterday, right? And so there's this very Virgo detail oriented organization hierarchy system about it. Even the way like the queen lays eggs, the queen isn't deciding, the hive is deciding for her. They are making the cells a certain size or shape to tell her, plant a boy bee here, plant a girl bee here. And
Wow.
very interesting, right? It's I think I've maxed out on my level of bee knowledge of where I'm at with it, but I took a lot of apprenticeships, a lot of classes, and I know what I want to know to be a backyard beekeeper, to be able to be contributing to the garden is why I
Mhm.
wanted to get into beekeeping.
That's fascinating. And also going back to the ruler that you have, that Mercury is the ruler.
Mm-hmm,
So sharing knowledge is
mm-hmm.
also part of like what you came to do, to know these things, learn something, and give it to your community, right? There's really this thing with Mercury, the messenger,
Mm-hmm.
which is here to teach, to pass forward the knowledge. Um, yeah.
Publish the knowledge through
Publish. Oh God, yeah.
my north node is in my ninth house too, so I feel very connected to that side of me, but it also, I feel like it's okay to graduate from that a little bit and do things a little bit differently. So guys, if you are able to come to this workshop, please do, because it is such a gift to have this time with Sarah. And then they can also book sessions with you or take classes with you. Do you want to talk a little bit about your business before we wrap?
Absolutely. So I have a few workshops that I run twice a year. So once during the summer and once during the winter break. So those are workshops for intermediate astrology students, about who want to deepen their practice, but who know the basic founding blocks. And I teach the basics at Deborah Silverman School of Astrology. So Deborah Silverman has a school. If you go on her website, it's deborahsilvermanastrology.com, and she teaches the foundations of astrology. It's a really beautiful school, very helpful. And I'm teaching over there levels 1, 2, and 3. So I'm a master mentor. So all I do is teach astrology, basically. That's like, it's my passion.
Yes.
It's really, and so I have these workshops. I also do sessions one-on-one. I give readings, all sorts of readings, relationship, couples, singles, predictions, solar returns, which is like a year ahead that we do at your birthday. I have a plethora of ways to read a chart, and I love doing these one-on-one sessions with people where we're like inside a container looking at your chart and working together to make sense of things, of where you come from, where you're going, where you're at now, how to also sometimes, a lot of clients come to an astrology reading, and the first thing, if I tell them that they're going through something big, it feels like relief, like, oh my God, I'm not going
Yeah.
crazy.
Yes.
So the biggest takeaway I feel from an astrology reading is this validation. Like, okay, there is a reason why things are this way. And we can kind of like, I feel like my work sometime in reading is, like a necklace that's at the bottom of the drawer that's really tangled. And I'm a really good detangler. So people come with their tangled necklace and they're like, what do we do with this? And I know how to unravel the knots for them and help them like make sense of it, right? So this is how I feel sometimes an astrology reading is. It's like all of these things that are actually interrelated, or
Mhm.
all of these parts of ourselves that are contradictory,
Right.
you know,
Mhm.
like I'm a Taurus sun and moon, but my Mars and Venus are in Aries. So I, so these two parts of me that are very true of myself,
Mhm.
very important of myself, are contradictory.
Mhm.
And when you learn that these, that you don't have to change, that you don't have, that there's nothing wrong with you, that it's okay, that you get permission. At best, an astrologer is going to give you permission. You're going to feel permission to be who you are, validated, understood. So that's my work. I feel like I'm accompanying people, holding their hand through their life and trying to make sense of it with them. So I'm also like, I do astrology coaching where I have, year-long programs with people to help them get to the next level of their life, using these tools, these timing tools that are so precise and helpful, you know, also knowing that it's not always go time, you know, that
Mhm.
it's not always produce time, that sometimes it's, stop,
Mhm.
look, learn, integrate. That's really helpful, learning about timing and cycles and knowing which cycle you're in. So, I mean, I feel so blessed that Deborah Silverman gave me that reading 25 years ago, and that she planted that seed inside of me that this is possible, that you can do that in the world,
Right.
um, because I mean, I love what I do. I love it. I'm very passionate.
I hear I love what I do too. It lights me up that other people might get to be in touch with their psychic, with their intuition. It makes me cry, it gives me chill bumps. I can't wait for somebody to like get their hit and it to be, I mean, I know what that feels like. It's like, oh, that's so juicy. And the same is true for me with astrology, right? It's like, oh yeah, you can know yourself, you can see yourself, and that's so juicy. I mean, that's why I was attracted to astrology, and that's why I still write the columns and still do the readings. I love that you talk about there's so many different ways to work with it. Is would Deborah be okay? Does she share publicly her midheaven?
I know her midheaven.
I just
Well,
wonder.
yeah, she has Cancer midheaven.
Okay, I was just thinking how fulfilling it is to her to have a student like like to really feel her purpose fulfilled by being a mama hen to you and many others. But
Right.
to get like a Sarah as your student that goes on and pushes that information forward in a way that is life changing for so many people, not only is it like empowering to you, but also probably soul fulfilling to
Mhm.
her.
It really is. I just, when I went to Colorado, so for Isar, I spent 2 days at her house first. So I
Mm.
stopped in Boulder and just like spent 2 days with my mentor one on one, just hugging a lot. And she cried a bunch. She was crying a bunch. She was like, I don't know what's wrong with me. But it is overwhelming, I think, for her to realize how many of these seeds, first of all, she has planted, and through her school. So she has so many students who became great astrologers and who do this for a living, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I think, yeah, I think that's part of her greatest pleasure, is to see all of us grow into accomplished astrologer. And yeah, so she has this Cancer midheaven. She's extremely nurturing, extremely loving. And this is what she does, is she brings people up, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to have a mentor that's kind of like you. I had somebody say, get a Scorpio that's older than you, a woman Scorpio that's older than you, so that you can kind of see how the path can unfold. And I did that. You know, I also have a Deborah mentor who's a Scorpio, and she's you know, I think it's important to have those people like you're talking about that are mentors that can bring you forward in your life, that have something in common in your thread. And so I'm so glad that you guys got to spend some time together, and how fulfilling that must be for both of you, but for so many people that you guys both touch with your sessions and with your classes. So like I said earlier, guys, I'm so excited that we get to have Sarah teaching. I hope you can make it live. We're gonna send you the replay if you can't make it live, but non-members can register for this event. If you're a member, you're gonna get your link in your member portal and in the email. And you can find all of this at wiseskiescollective.com. The class one last time is September 12th at noon Central. And if you want to pop on early and ask Sarah anything, we'll be on Instagram. What did I just say? September 9th?
September 9th. Yeah.
In Central. So anything else in closing?
I'm really excited to do this for you and your community. I'm loving this new relationship that we're building. It's really fantastic. It's our common friend Celeste who put us in touch, and she told me, your ancestors told me to put you in touch with Tiffany, and I was like, thank you, ancestors, for doing that.
Yes.
So and it's just like, it's really beautiful to continue to spread love, even if we're not from Brooklyn, but you know, it's the Brooklyn way. And that's what we do, right? We just spread the love, continue being, you know, in our purpose, doing our midheaven, and these incredible connections that we're making all together. I feel very blessed to be doing this for your community. Yeah.
Me too. And I'm so glad you brought up Celeste. So thank you, Celeste. If you end up watching or listening, you guys know that we have a huge astrology crush on our friend Celeste. She's astrologybyceleste.com. And thank you so much for your time. And I'll see you on Instagram on the 9th.
See you on the 9th.
Okay. Blessings.
Bye, love.